Okay, we are live on the air, and this is the Producers Hangout, episode 11. I am Flux of fluxwithit.com, Flux With It Sound Designs, and all that good stuff. And today I've got Pete Marriott here. I'll let him introduce himself as well.
I'm Pete Marriott.
Short and sweet and to the point. Letting them know. Okay, we are live on the air, and this is the Producers Hangout, episode 11. I am Flux of fluxwithit.com, Flux With It Sound Designs, and all that good stuff. And today...
Probably you, Flux.
Me. That was probably me. I do that sort of thing.
Oh, because I'm like, what's going on?
Being the host of the show, I get at least one mulligan a show, and that's my mulligan for the show. So we've got Casey Brubaker here. Did I pronounce it properly this time?
Sure did.
That's awesome. And you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, Casey, producer, engineer, mainly. Producer on the side. But yeah, let's get this going, man.
So what we're going to do is, first topic of the show, I wanted to get a good opinion and some insight into a topic that is kind of near and dear to my heart. I've been noticing in the Producers Hangout, which is our Facebook group, which if you're not a member, I highly recommend you come and join the conversation over there. But we've had discussion about... there was recently an article posted that ranked, I think, 3,000 different headphones and then ranked them tier to tier. And the way that it was all collated and the information was put together had a lot to deal with giving 75% of the points to major websites and magazines and how they ranked these headphones, and then a little bit to specs. And something that I wanted to know was how you guys tend to use reviews and use popular opinion and use rumors or whatever you want before you buy a piece of gear or before you make an investment in something. Me personally, I've found that not a lot of, well, let me put it this way. I found that there's still a lot of payola and paid reviews going on out there, both on YouTube, the internet, you know, major magazines, these things. I see where money comes into play and might skew a review, and we all know that that's not necessarily, you know, best practices for media, but it's out there. So I wanted to know you guys' thoughts. I want to start with Casey and ask you, when you go to make a purchase, what are some of the first things that you go through?
Well, I mean, obviously I check out the forums, you know, if I can. I take advantage of the search tools in most of these forums online and try to gather a little information like that first. And, you know, I pretty much kind of get some feedback there, and then I check out different websites as far as reviews go, because you might have a lot of reviews on one website, not so many on the other, but I always try to look at, even if there's only one review on a certain website, I take a look at it, because to me, I seem to be able to, I can understand when somebody's being brutally honest about something, and I can understand when somebody might have buyer's remorse and they're just talking bad about the product just because. And I tend to point that out pretty quick, so that helps. But I always try to at least demo a piece of gear before I buy it, and if I can't, then I'm up to the reviews to take a chance on it. And most of these places have return policies, you know, so
that's true.
You know, so I don't do too bad. I maybe bought one piece of gear that I wasn't like totally happy with, so, and I ended up returning that, but everything else panned out pretty good. So yeah.
How about you, Pete?
You know, I grew up reading Electronic Musician magazine, and you know, the reviews were like a part of it that I used to really get excited about. Ever since the internet, that has changed drastically. I no longer read Electronic Musician, you know, because around that same time, that's when I discovered Computer Music magazine. And, you know, from what I noticed about this particular publication is that, you know, the reviews are based on a 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, whatever um, rating. And the thing is that you're not getting an in-depth review in these publications. You know, it's just real short, and, you know, they just either allude to whether if the product is good or if it's bad. And, you know, because of that, I don't feel a connection with the reviewers anymore. Where I used to get that in Electronic Musician, and, you know, you can read these reviews online on their websites, Music Radar, and, you know, you have just like what Casey said about you know, going to like message boards. You know, I used to go to a site called Gear Sluts. I don't know if they still exist, but
They do.
I used to like getting, you know, the opinions of people there. But there seems to be a lot of people that's jaded
Yeah.
on certain products.
Yeah, I'll say I mean I definitely, if you are someone who goes to forums often and understands forums, forums can be really great. But if you're someone who doesn't frequent forums and doesn't understand some of the ins and outs of forums, I think they can also be really bad because they can give you a false representation. So there are certain things that people need to understand when they go into a forum to look for reviews or understanding about a product. If you go to, you know, say X company's forum and you hop on there and you see a lot of negative opinions about, like, say, tech support, you might not know that the chances are that somebody who has a good experience with a tech support issue probably is less likely to comment about it than someone who has a bad situation, you know? And same with someone who has a problem with their gear is more likely to comment on these forums than someone who doesn't have any problem at all. So knowing that, you know, you can kind of use that to your advantage, but at the same time, more important than just reading those issues is understanding what sort of issues they are, and then on top of that, understanding the responses. How quickly are they getting responses? Is the community active? Is the forum dead? Does the company pay people or have people on to constantly answer questions, and are they answering the majority of the questions, or are they letting a lot of these problems just kind of sit there and the last post you saw is, you know, not been answered for 4 months, you know, things like that. So when I look at forums, you know, I'm more looking for those sorts of things, like, okay, is this company, you know, handling their business, basically, which some of the major companies out there, you know, are pretty lackluster when it comes to that. I mean, there's a few good ones, and there's a few bad ones. Like, for instance, and I'm not bashing, I'm just giving an example here. When I go into, like, the Novation forums, they're not the worst that I've seen, but they're certainly not the best. And at this point, last time I checked, it was like their forum was almost dead. So unless they're migrating or something, I don't know. I was pretty disappointed when I was asking about, you know, technical issues, and they weren't being fixed and weren't being addressed for quite a long time. Whereas I would go to other forums and find, you know, like just an active community. And I think active community goes a lot towards whether or not reviews can be trusted and how well they can be understood even. Just like Pete, like, I'm a big, for a long time, music magazine fan. I've got tons of these things, like Future Music, Computer Music, EQ, you know, just I've got them dating back to probably 97 or so. And I've got just huge stacks of them that my wife yells at me about and wants me to get rid of, and I should, but it's at the same time, what I like using the old reviews for is I'll go back through, like, my 1998 Future Music magazines, and I'll start digging through them, and I'll find reviews for the old gear, like a SP808EX or something, you know, and I'll be reading, like, every little detail about it, and I'll be like, okay, well, this was, let's say it was $1,800 back in 1998. And then you go to eBay and you're like, oh, I can get that now for $300. Oh, I can get this quasi MIDI for dirt cheap now. And so I'll use it a lot of the times to like try to find little pieces of gear that maybe have slipped through the cracks over the past decade or so, and try to find like some old gear that maybe I really wanted back in the day that I couldn't have and now I can for dirt cheap. But the disheartening fact is I started reading as I got more involved in the music industry and as I got more involved with music companies and starting to do things like consult for product manufacturers and kind of see behind the scenes how development actually works. I started to become more familiar with the products as they went through the review process, and it started to make me look at some of these major sources in a different light. I would start to see problems with gear get kind of panned and not really discussed in reviews, whereas features more kind of bolstered, and then certain reviews where guys and granted there is a level of opinion, so we'll give a little bit of leeway on that, but I do find a lot of things where these reviews get padded, and whether it's being padded because of money, padded because of relationships, or padded because of fanboyism, whatever it is, I've noticed certain things like even top 10 lists really skewed, like certain pieces of gear put in top 10 lists at the top of the list, whereas other pieces that I know darn well are probably better suited for the job are left off, and it makes you think, okay, well, maybe somebody didn't pay the certain people the right way, or get the right review in, whatever it is. So it makes me very skeptical when it comes to major reviews, whereas prior to the internet, that was your main thing. Like if maybe you knew somebody who had this odd synthesizer or sampler that you couldn't get your hands on, and you could talk to them a little bit, but you would think that the magazine would be the better review, and now I'm not so sure about that these days. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, also you got to take into the fact, that opinions definitely come into play. Because I mean, for example, like you look at like a top 100 movies of all time, you know what I mean? Like you're looking at the top 10 on that, and you're like, no way, like this isn't right. It's the same way with gear. The publisher, probably has, if they're involved in the subject matter, I'm sure their opinion probably comes into play.
For me, I've come to like what Kev does. He goes on YouTube and he gives his honest opinion on a product, and I think the whole video review thing is something that will eventually become the true standard of the review. And the reason I say that is because you can show people the product and what it can do, and you opine on it. Would I be interested in getting involved in something like that? I don't know, but I do know that I love watching them, and I think Kev is really good at it, and he's very comfortable with the whole thing. Very comfortable.
I'll say that when I do reviews of sound packs or really anything, I try to look at it in a couple of different lights. So I try to look at it as, okay, how's the average user going to approach it, and what is the average user for that particular product? Like sound packs are going to be a different marketplace than somebody who's buying an analog synth, than somebody who's buying something like a Volca Beats or something, Right. So I try to keep those things in mind. Like, maybe I'm not going to be quite as harsh about certain things like tying notes or something on a Volca Beats versus, something like Machine, where if you can't get in depth on Machine and really into the nitty gritty, then there's a problem. You know what I mean? Because that should be the centerpiece to your studio. So I find one of the things that I struggle with is taking so for instance, we have the Producers Hangout, and we've got a lot of people on there that, you know, people get to know each other by using these groups. You know, we get to know, okay, like I know what background Casey has. I know his schooling and everything. I know when I get on there, there are certain posters that that I respect, and that after listening to their opinion a few times, just like when you meet a friend and maybe their musical opinion is completely different than yours, and you're like, you know what, you didn't like XYZ's last album, you're a moron, right? Or, you know, I loved this album, what do you mean you hated this album, you know? And it can be the same way with gear. Good friend of mine, St. Joe, like when he reviews gear, I know his personality really well. I know what he likes about gear really well. So certain reviewers I kind of look for, and I'll gravitate to. I'll say, okay, I know that this guy reviews things in the way that I would think, you know, or I know that this guy hates taking time to map a controller. He likes things that just lay out evenly. So he'll probably, you know, review a MIDI controller the way I like. But I also know that this person maybe doesn't like things to sound the same way that I do. Like me particularly, I like dark, gritty sounding sounds, whereas maybe somebody like Richard London likes a clean sound. You know, he tends to gravitate towards these more bright and clean, crisp sounds. So if we were to look at a sound pack in the same way, something he might not like, I might love, and vice versa. So right. I try to take the reviewer themselves into account. But when you're dealing with a magazine, I feel like that's a little bit harder to do unless they're writing a lot of editorials, you know, and you're reading the editorials, which I don't know that most people who are buying magazines do. Because I'll tell you right now, when I would buy a magazine and it looks like this on the cover, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to the back and I'm trying to find out about this new Nord synthesizer, and I'm looking at, you know, the reviews. I'm not jumping right away to the front and reading the editorial first, you know, right. Which maybe is wrong on my part. Maybe that's a fault that I have. But I wonder if that's more the common aspect of how people are looking at things.
That's interesting. You know, I read it from front to back. So.
Well, yeah. In time, I'm gonna pore over the thing probably 5 times. But I would say, like, initially, yeah, I'm gonna be diving into it in that way.
Well, I would imagine that people are also attracted to the fact that these publications have DVDs in each issue. You know, and you know that DVD gets you to, you know, video. It gets you to PDFs. You know, and you know, and it has, you know, sounds and demos and all that stuff. I mean, we know this, and you know, I think that's part of the attraction. I mean, what I know, I'm paying $18 plus tax.
Yes. When
I buy an issue, so I'm spending over, you know, $20.
This is This issue is this is old. So when is this one from? I just grabbed this off my shelf. This is 2008. And I believe at the time they weren't even doing them in the U.S. anymore, so this is imported from the U.K.
Right.
And it's $14.99 U.S. And you know, and that's the thing is, like, I have all the DVDs like in their own separate holder. Like, I love that stuff, and like I'm a fan of Cyclic, who's like one of the sound designers that they use, and you know, there's a lot that I love about it. I love more the master class and like the editorial stuff nowadays than I like the reviews, because nowadays I feel very skewed about the reviews. But I really like the editorial stuff, and I really like just reading other people's opinions about things. But I will say that I have kind of switched over to using the iPad to view a lot of these magazines and these reviews and whatnot, and you can still access all the content that used to be available on a DVD, but I find me less likely to get the content that's, you know, if I'm not using it in hardback with an actual DVD. Yeah, exactly.
I love the specials.
Yeah, I have a ton of those as well. The specials.
I love the specials. And you know, this has nothing to do with reviews, but I just want to. This book right here I wish I wrote this book. I really seriously wish I wrote this book. Because this book right here, this guy, Paul White, he gets it. He gets it completely about, working in the box and outside of it. And, this book gave me more information in 2014 than the Recording Engineer's Handbook, which is crazy thick. And and I'm not dissing, but because I read that book when I was like in my early 20s, so I'm in my 40s now. This book gives you much more information, and you will retain that information because it's very much like these magazines. It's visual, It's a very visual book, and it's modern day tools. It covers everything, Pro Tools, FL Studio, Reason, and the information. So this book right here is a lot more informative, in my personal opinion, than the Recording Engineer's Handbook, which is like mass, in thickness.
Yeah.
And it's
also let's be honest, it's a duller read, It's not written as joyfully, I'll say.
Yeah.
But I mean, to that same regard, so like I've got all these these review magazines, and I go back and I look through them, and I'm not going to name names, but like I look at certain reviews of new products that maybe I'm going to try to keep this as vague as possible. Okay, certain drum machines that I've had a hand in working with. And during the development stage, and I know certain flaws are there, right? For whatever reason, doesn't matter the reason. But then the review comes out, and I read the review, and I'm like, wow, they just completely didn't care about like any of these things that me personally made me grind my teeth, like made me like so like sweat. I was so upset, And so it has me wondering, like, okay, which would you rather do? Would you rather talk to someone who is a industry professional but is paid to do reviews by specific companies, or would you rather talk to people that you maybe get to know over the internet or get to know in person from just like studio sessions or whatever, and just take their opinion and take that more into account? Like, for instance, let's say 6 months from now, a new sequencer is going to be coming out that is supposed to be the end-all be-all sequencer that is going to make you so happy. It has everything that you supposedly want in it, right? But you've never touched it. What's going to be your first? Are you going to wait? Or are you going to jump right? Actually, you know what's a good example? Let's say Bitwig, because Bitwig kind of was that for a lot of people. It kind of made a lot of people say, oh, this is what I need. This is what I've been waiting for. It's Ableton Live without the shackles, or it's my workflow finally done right, or whatever it is. Were you somebody who was like, okay, I'm just going to fall back and wait? Or how interested are you to move forward, or what's your opinion on that? How anxious are you to move? Put it that way.
Casey?
I tend to hold off. Like, I still don't have a machine studio. I'm rocking the MK2 over here. From what I'm doing right now, I just don't, it's not as practical, and I don't have money falling out of my ass, so it's.
Which, for the record, I agree with that opinion. Like, to me personally, MK2 is excellent.
Yeah, does the job, and I do more engineering work than production, so it's. Yeah.
Were you so using that as an example, right? Like, and we don't have to say specifically Bitwig, but let's say that there's something comes out that you feel like you need for your studio, yet you have not heard it. what's your first method of operation? Are you going to wait until friends of yours have it and you hear what they think, or are you going to try to go to their studio and hear it, or?
I think it comes down to what we talked about earlier regarding reviews on products.
Mm-hmm.
If I can, I will try to demo it first, just to get my initial impression. But I have not run across one piece of gear yet that was coming out, or it was coming out soon, that I was just like, okay, it's mine. Pre-order. I've never came across anything like that.
Pete, have you ever had a fail in a gear purchase? Like just something that you purchased that you thought would do what you needed it to do, and it just didn't cut the mustard. What was that?
Machine Studio 2.0 software.
I still haven't had a session with you on that.
Yeah, we have to have a session.
Yeah,
Well,
we absolutely do.
Actually, it has nothing to do with Native Instruments. It has everything to do with my perception and my learning curve. So, with me, I used to use, like religiously. I used to use like the Ensoniq ASR 10, the MPC 60. There was times where I've had, the S900 or the S1000 samplers, and various synthesizers. But the thing about it is that back in those days, I always read the manual from front to back, and I got a handle on it, immediately. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that these are physical items, where with Machine 2.0 is a physical item, but it's also software, right? But the problem for me with my learning curve is that I'm not making the connections between my Mach 1 controller and the software.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it kind of is frustrating because I did go to Guitar Center and I did demo the studio version, and it was like it clicked automatically. It was super easy.
So are you using the MK1?
Yeah, I'm using the MK1. It happens to be, on standby.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think and an important aspect of that is I would say that it's perfectly sensible that something that might fit someone's setup perfectly will not fit someone else. You know what I mean? Like it might be perfect for one person and not perfect for other. I will personally say that Machine 2.0 is still not anywhere near where I feel it needs to be. I'll tell you that right now. I think it's an improvement over 1.8.2, but I do not feel that it's where it should be. But I don't want to get too deep into the whole machine thing. I'll tell you a failure that I had in a gear purchase. I've had very few things that I've bought that I ended up not happy with. I've had gear that I've sold just because I've had it for so long and I just wanted something to take its place. That wasn't, it wasn't so much that the gear wasn't good. It was just that, I wanted to take that investment and put it towards this investment. But I'll tell you, probably the one that stands out the most in my mind that was like just an absolute turd was I got the M Audio Venom, and that synthesizer had so much potential to be cool, and I struggle to think of a time where a company dropped the ball harder than on that synthesizer, because you literally could not fully program the synthesizer without running software with it, but they never developed software for it. They had an outside company work on the software for it and then didn't finish that program and just kind of left it. So oh God, that thing made me probably more mad than any other synthesizer that I've ever had in my studio. And I've had an Alesis Fusion HD, which, and I had that from the gate, which, if people know about that, it was an amazing synthesizer and workstation, but its initial software was terrible, and it got better towards the end. But its initial software was absolutely horrible.
Fox, did you pick up the Venom when that 199 price point that they at
I
the
got it. I want to say, I'm trying to remember exactly. I got it. I got it for dirt cheap. I know that. I did get it for like $200. And I got it because I was like, I liked the idea of it. I liked the architecture, the sound engine, and the guy who designed that sound engine. I'm a fan of. He's the same guy who designed, I believe, the Alesis Micron sound engine, Ion and Micron sound engine. And he's a brilliant synthesist. So I was really excited by it, but you could tell that they budgeting and whatever corporate crap it was had completely tied his hands, because this thing was an amazing synth that if you could get to all the features, it'd be great. But man, was it a struggle to get to any of the good stuff inside of that thing. And it wasn't built well. The knobs felt terrible. It was just a piece of junk. But the reviews, even in major magazines and stuff, gave it good reviews. Like it had good reviews. It had a little bit of a buzz going behind it. Not a big buzz, but And I think that's something to watch out for too, is post-release buzz. Post-release, how many people are talking about this? Post-release, are there a lot of people in forums actually, praising it or, excited about it? Do you have friends that are really, passionate about this new gear? Like when Machine first came out, there was a lot of people passionate about it. When Beatthang was being, worked on, pre-release, there was a lot of passion going on, and then when it got released, it tamped down awful fast, and it got a little bit better with some of the software updates, but it still to this day is looked at as a bastard because, of what it was lauded to be. I don't know if a lot of people follow drum machines like I do, but before that thing came out, for a good, I want to say 3 years, it was promoted in forums, person to person, at a really grassroots level, which I've gotten to meet the guys who actually built it, that are no longer associated with it, but they did it with an actual passion and love, some misguided promotion, but when the thing actually, hit streets, it was lauded as, this is the MPC 1000 as it should have been made, that kind of stuff. And then when people got it in their hands, not so much. You know what I mean? Like it didn't quite cut the mustard. So I tend to take reviews these days really like, I'd much rather talk to people that I know who actually have used it and what I know that their passions are. Whether their passions are engineering and sound quality, or whether their passions are live performance orientation or studio orientation. Like lots of people have different preferences,
I love the fact that what they did, the Beat Kangs or with the Beat Thang thing. I love the fact that they modeled it physically, the pads after the ASRX and the ASRX Pro. And, because, I'm an ASRX owner, and, I love the fact that these pads were soft, like the MPC.
Yeah.
Because on the, the ASRX, it's clacking, clack,
hard. Yeah.
But I agree with you. There was a lot of missteps in the marketing.
Yeah.
In the marketing and the execution. I remember seeing the videos, and I was like, okay, something was amiss there. It didn't connect with me, and I had one for a couple of months, and I don't remember it. So it's a product that came in here in this room that came and gone.
Some of the other things that I wonder about. I wonder if I'm in the extreme minority, slightly minority, or moderate, okay, regular guy in the fact that Um, I am a gear nut. Like I have a passion for audio. I have a passion for gear that helps me get the audio that I want and the workflow that I want. But I do wonder, like, about so for instance, Beat Thang got marketed and got first put into Best Buys, which is consumer market, which was like really kind of mind blowing. I was really surprised to see that. But at the same time, being somebody who follows gear as a fan and as somebody who's like really dedicated to it, I know where they came from before they did that. You know what I mean? Like, I knew all about the Street Box, the Zoom Street Box, which was their previous product, which they, you know, Zoom does not exactly have a pro level name in audio, but they do have an affordable, you know, a lot of features per dollar, maybe not boutique audio quality, but they have got a lot of features per dollar, which is cool. So it was interesting to see that these guys who they made the Street Box, which me personally, I wasn't at all interested in owning. Like, to me, it was like prosumer at best, more like consumer who's maybe wants to dabble a little bit with a drum machine, and that's fine, you know. And maybe my perception on that's wrong, whatever. But I wasn't interested in that product, but I saw that they were trying to take it to the next level. So I had in my mind already, okay, these are guys that are passionate about something. They want to do something heavy. When gear comes out new, oftentimes I'm aware of it well before it comes out. And I wonder, on like an engineering standpoint, somebody like Casey, how familiar are you with gear before it comes out? Like, before a launch of a product? Do you oftentimes already know the buzz behind it beforehand, or are you waiting more for it to come out and then you're finding out about it and then you're, you know, saying, okay, well, is this something I'm going to be interested in?
I don't know a whole lot usually when it first comes out. I usually wait a few weeks, and then, you know, things start coming in, you know, feedback and whatnot. But initially, I never know much. Maybe that's just because that's a personal thing. Maybe I just don't do enough digging, you know, or research behind a product. But yeah, a few weeks, I get some feedback and I make my decision.
Gotcha. What about you, Pete? Now you're on a level where you're kind of like, it's interesting because, like, I'm on one side as a sound designer where I'm constantly trying to get unique sounds. I'm constantly trying to get something that's different from what other people have. And, you know, some of that is gear. The majority of it's skill, but there's always going to be like, okay, well, I'm always looking for that different sound. Whereas, so Casey's on an engineer level, and Casey's just trying to use tools to their best potential, which is
plugins.
You know, in the scenario that he's in, it makes sense. You're kind of in the hybrid scenario, whereas you're, you know, an album producer. You need unique sounds, and you need to do that. So I wonder, do you follow this stuff? Is this more something like you're more interested in what you're comfortable with, or how do you tend to go about it?
I finally got to the point where Mrs. Marriott is no longer ignoring such conversations about gear. She's now engaging me. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with, I mean, if I wish I had the space, but, you know, I say this all the time. If I ever hit Powerball, I'm going to buy 3 studios. One studio in the office compound, right? Then there's the studio that's an actual studio. Like, I want to buy a studio that's already, you know, that has the analog gear, the 2-inch tape, you know, the Neve or the SSL console.
Sure.
You know, I want to go completely nuts. And I want to have, you know, my home studio be, and I want to be able to have, you know, as much gear as possible because, you know, it's the gear that I'm inspired by, you know. When I'm doing, you know, tweaking sounds or doing some kind of sample manipulation, you know, it's the gear that drives me there, you know.
Absolutely.
For instance, a DX7 and a CZ101 does not sound alike. There's very strong different, characteristics. So, but in tweaking, it's a lot of fun to work with.
I'm going to be careful bringing up the DX7 because Richard London gets really upset when people talk about FM. He really doesn't like FM sounds. So, shout out to Richard London and your hate for FM.
I would like to know why that is.
It's ridiculous because he loves clean sounds, and I'm like, dude, like, come on, like, and he loves Prince, and I'm like, dude, that doesn't make any sense to me, like, whatever, like.
Yeah,
but,
like when it comes to the gear in general, it's good that the gear actually inspires you, but what a lot of people, especially people just starting out, they think that the gear is necessary in order to achieve what they're trying to achieve, and that's definitely not the case.
I absolutely agree.
I had a professor. Yeah, we had a pro studio. Well, I'm transferring schools in the process of transferring, but at my previous college, they had a nice professional studio atmosphere. And one thing the professor would do is he'd do everything that he would do. He would tell you that, all right, I want you to go home and do this exact same thing. Like, it was never a matter of you need this piece of gear or you need to, this console to do this. He'd always try to teach us techniques that can be applied to any scenario, whether or not it's a little $500 budget setup or a $50,000 commercial setup, which really opened my eyes and let me know that I don't need, because that's the hype behind, engineer, producer. People hear that and they think, they need all this stuff, and that's really not the case. It can actually be a distraction more than anything.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, that's actually, and that's a good point. Something along the lines of what Pete was also saying, as far as being inspired by the gear. I've been struggling with the idea that some of us get locked into a studio mentality. And when I say a studio mentality, I don't mean just, okay, we work in the studio and we, are twisting knobs and doing all that. But I mean, if you're a producer, right? So for Casey, this is less about engineering and more about actual song production and songwriting. But the average person does not relate to the studio. The average person, when somebody comes into my home, this is my home studio right here. This is just my personal setup. And when the average person that I know walks down and they see this all around me, their head kind of like starts spinning and they're like, what is this? Are you programming VCRs? Like, what's happening down here? Like, they don't get it. You know what I mean? And I noticed that a lot of, especially in hip-hop more than anything else, you don't see this as much in rock and roll or anything else, but I noticed that people will start to incorporate the studio into their songs and into their songwriting. And I think that that's a huge, like, as a nerd, it's great. Like, I love hearing this kind of stuff as a studio nerd, but it's such a niche. Like, it's such a small sector that I'm like, if people start focusing too much on the gear, and then it seeps into their song creation and their music production, both in mixing and in writing, I'm like, I feel like that's a big negative. The only reason that I have all this gear is because, I'm trying to do specific things with those specific items, whereas there is very few plugins that are going to give me the same workflow that I need to do what I do. To me, the sound quality is really cool, and it's really hard to get the same sound quality for certain things, but you got to really nitpick to talk about those things, Like, for instance, if you're dealing with the difference between a review about, say, the Moog Sub Fatty versus a review about Monarch or Diva or, what is it, the Mini Moog V or any of those things, the chances that any layman is going to hear the audible difference in the way a filter squelches or whatever is really unlikely. You know what I mean? It's extremely unlikely.
Yeah, because these plugins are sounding good,
They're sounding incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy.
So it's like you gotta, like, even if you have a passion for the gear, you gotta kind of distance yourself at the same time from the gear.
It was something I wanted to point out before. There's a producer and engineer here called Don Gunn, who I met through Mark Farver and Aaron English. And Don does a lot of presets for Yuhi. And you can check out their product called Satin.
Yeah,
the thing about it, yeah. Now, this is tape emulation software, right? And a lot of the songs that you hear on my album are Don Gunn presets. I didn't even have to touch it or nothing because it sounds like the analog tape that I grew up knowing. The thing about it is that I feel that reviews should always be comparative, where you get 3 or 4 products which are within the same range. Just like how you mentioned, oh, you're gonna make me pull mine out. You're gonna make me go in the closet and pull mine out. Them things are heavy as hell too.
Yeah, it is. I struggled a little bit because I'm getting old and fat.
Yeah, but man, you just distracted me. But basically, what I'm saying is, comparative reviews to me are the best reviews to read because not only are you getting insight on the product that you're initially interested in, but at the same time you're getting more to think about. And I would like to see more comparative reviews being done in the computer music magazines. They do that every once in a while, but it's not a regular thing. And I would love to see reviewers like Kev and Joe, do their video reviews of this. There's another guy that I like a lot. You ever seen this guy called Torley? He's a keyboardist.
Oh, he's great. I love Torley's stuff. What is it called? Preset something?
I can't remember his the name.
Yeah,
I always
preset thing, but I love that stuff, man. That's great.
Yeah.
And Mark Doty is great.
Mark Doty.
Mark Doty, I highly recommend his stuff. Automatic Gainsey, that's what he goes by. And his stuff is very cool. It's all analog synth based, and he gets into a lot of like vintage analog synths, which if you're a nut for that stuff, I highly recommend his reviews. B-Boy Tech Report.
Yeah.
Reviews, I love those. I do a lot of reviews, but I do mostly lately a lot of them have been analog modular gear, but I do a lot of software stuff, and sometimes I'll just do like previews of gear and that kind of thing. But that's the thing about YouTube is I have to be really careful about YouTube reviews that I watch. So if I know the people, and I've actually gotten to speak to a lot of those guys. Like I know Joe, I know Corey from B-Boy Tech Report. I've talked to Mark Doty. I've talked to a bunch of these different people, and I trust them. There's something about the cream rises to the top, and there are reviewers that I don't trust. I will tell you right now that there are some very large YouTube people that I watch their reviews, and after I'm done watching them, having used the same gear that they have, I totally disagree with their opinions, right. And sometimes even their facts I kind of disagree with. So with YouTube can get scary because what can happen a lot of the time is you'll see people who have these YouTube channels and they're getting, gear sent to them, or they're being paid to do a certain review or whatever it is. It makes you like if you don't start seeing some reviews that represent what you already know to be true, then maybe that particular reviewer is not best for you. Look at Casey. He's got the Struder up.
Is Casey using Apollo?
Yeah, Apollo 16.
Yeah.
Oh, you
So
have the 16. Nice. I'm heavily considering that to be my next interface.
the only reason I got the 16 though is because of analog summing. I wanted 16 channels of summing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's basically what I want it for as well. So I mean, I can't use a twin because I need more inputs than that. But the twin is great too, man. Like, oh, and the new Motu interfaces look gorgeous. But I'm getting completely sidetracked, but I really don't care. The Motu stuff, it blows my mind that they have these new interfaces that are gorgeous and really awesome, and they're not they have DSP in them that's great. Like if you've used Motu plugins, Motu samplers, like they have a sound to them that's really nice. Like their UVI player and Mach 5 and all that sounds fantastic. So it makes me wonder, like, why are they not just look at what UAD is doing and capitalize on that? They should be doing the same thing and offloading processor onto their interfaces, because honestly, like they're every bit as good as UAD is, and you know, I wish they were doing that, because right now I'm really up in the air between the new Motu interfaces and an Apollo interface. And the reason that I kind of want to gravitate to the Motu is less about the price difference, which is about, I want to say it's about $600 price difference, but more about the fact that it's DC coupled, and I can send control voltages out of the interface and into the interface as well. So it's more accurate metering and CV control, which is awesome. But I'm sorry, that was completely off topic. But yeah, as far as things like what you were saying, as far as like tape and all that stuff, I went on a huge kick about a year ago, and got, like, that was just one of them. But I have, I think, 7 or 8 different reel-to-reel tape machines now, and I kind of went overboard. And I just wanted to have the experience, like, because I did some tracking when I was much younger. When I was about 16 or 17, I used to do some tracking to reel, and I used to edit with the razor blade and all that good stuff. And I kind of
don't know about that.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to get back to, like, doing some silly stuff like that, even though it was an absolute pain and I hated it at the time. It was like, now it was like I kind of missed the sound that I got from it, the saturation that I got from it, and less than the saturation, the compression. The compression that I got to tape was really cool. Like, it compressed in a way that you almost didn't notice it, but it pushed everything kind of together. So I went on this kick, and I got all these tape machines, and I started playing with all these tape machines. I've been using them. If you get the Dominant Drums machine expansion that I did, a lot of the drums go through tape on that, and I came to the conclusion after all of that it was more hassle than it was actually worth. Like, I did get some cool sound out of it, but the hassle level was way high, way high. So
And that's it, yeah. I mean,
I
it's
rarely use tape now, like
with
rare.
with the plugins. I mean, they're like, I've worked on actual tape, and I've worked on plugins with tape emulators, and even though I prefer the regular reel-to-reel, the actual machines, I just can't justify the hassle.
And it's expensive too.
Cost difference, yeah, and the cost difference. Tape's not cheap nowadays. I don't know if you've checked recently, but tape's not cheap, and you can use more than one instance. Like, you can just over and over, man. These plugins are just amazing, man. It's kind of scary at the same time, because I feel like eventually everything's gonna be digital, and people that have analog gear are gonna be looked at like, get out
How
of
do
here.
you feel about hands-on control?
I mean, it's not too bad. I mean, clicking around.
Are you using mostly a trackball in the studio, or what are you using in the studio to control your plugins?
I used an Artist Mix Surface.
Nice.
The Avid Artist Mix, and I mean, it's nice. I got the transport with it, which really is pretty cool for transport. Doesn't get as much use as the actual artist mix, but it's cool because this unit has pretty much everything. You can map out everything to the. It's got pan pots, parameters. You can map out pretty much anything.
But say you bring up Satin, all right? Are you mapping it, or are you just going ahead and grabbing your trackball or whatever and going at it like that?
I usually don't map much.
That's what I was gonna say.
I don't take.
That's the difference to me between. So as a sound designer, as somebody who's, and I do a lot of production still. Like I do a lot, mostly instrumental, and I'm getting ready in the next 2 months. I'm gonna be recording a band again that I recorded a couple years ago, and we're gonna be doing some stuff together again. But for a lot of what I do, it's like. If I'm loading up like 35 instances of all these different plugins and trying to do stuff, I'm not mapping everything, which is why I like Machine, because it auto maps. So I can, and it auto maps well at that, like to where, there's a scribble strip for every single knob, so that there's no guessing, which I can't. Which I used to have the remote SL. So where the Remote Zero SL, where I could just go ahead and, it had scribble strips, but I didn't like the auto mapping in that software quite as much. But when I'm working on actual hardware, be it a tape machine, be it a preamp, be it a synthesizer, it's just so much easier to grab a knob and turn it, or grab a cable and plug it in, as opposed to okay. Well, I mean, yeah, sure, I can click on it and then, drag up and down and that kind of thing, but that to me is less fun or intuitive than actually grabbing a physical knob.
Right, which is why I actually got the control surface in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, but you're not mapping your control surface to every single plugin. Yeah. But you're not mapping your control surface to every single plugin, right?
Correct, but if you go through a couple options on here, you can select plugins, find the plugin, and then it maps out pretty much everything across the board. It might not be exactly how it's displayed, but you can see it'll read on the scribble strip, dude, what's going on.
But I think, to me, that hopefully, my hope is more that gets better as opposed to just sound quality of plugins. Like, I really want hands-on control and more dedicated controllers and that kind of stuff to come out than anything else. Like, because I absolutely like what was it that Mike was showing, the Console 1? So he has the soft tube Console 1 that he was reviewing, and it gives you the full channel strip and everything is like permanently dedicated, mapped out, and you can get right to it and adjust your EQ and all that. I love the idea of that kind of stuff. Because to me, it's like, yeah, you can have like 100 different preamps inside of this software and still have the hands-on control. That's huge to me. Like, if my modular synth existed in software and I had 100% hands-on control, didn't have to scroll around, and it was just right there instantly, I could play with it, I would probably love it just about as much.
And the closest thing that's came out to that really is the Raven, units, which you aren't very fond of, if I recall.
Yeah, I'm not fond of it in the fact that I don't enjoy. I like touchscreens, just fine, but I don't feel that they are nearly as cool as physical faders and knobs. Like physical fader, nothing in my mind replaces a physical fader and a knob. Like. It's like when I start twisting a knob, like it's just, it's so instant, and it I know exactly where my hand is.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and you know exactly where you are. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, if I'm using a physical fader, like, and I love motorized faders too. I'm a huge fan of that, which is the artist mix is extremely nice, and right now, I got rid of my current motorized fader setup, and I'm in between whether I'm going to go artist mix or that new Behringer, which everybody's like, oh, Behringer, what? But the new Behringer's control surface is really nice.
I don't judge a company on its past,
I do.
Companies are always making moves. You know what I'm saying? You can't. You can judge.
I judge it on a lot of things, but that's
but they're
not
always advancing.
that's also not sound quality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that has nothing to do with my sound quality. Like if it breaks, it breaks. But if it's just a control surface, I use a Behringer patch bay and I have no issues with it. Like you know. I mean,
use
it's
an art patch bay and have no issues with it. I mean, same thing. Same.
Exactly. So, I mean, that doesn't bother me quite as much. But I will say that when you're mixing, especially, like right now, because I haven't been mixing like a band or anything, I just use this guy right here, the fader port. You know, which is one fader, transport control. And then you've got, you can switch between your fader modes, your channel selects, and all that, which works. And you got a pan pod on it, which works nice.
It's a nice unit.
When you mix, do you tend to mix with more than one fader at a time, or do you only mix one fader at a time? Because I tend to.
It depends. I mean, like if it's a string section or something, I tend to grab 2 or 3 faders at a time and just kind of manipulate my fingers. I sit there and I listen to what's going on, and then I just kind of find that perfect medium. You know what I mean? And
that's
it's
exactly
really,
what I do. Yeah. Like, and I do that with vocals too. Like, if I'm working on a vocal with a dub, a lot of the times I'm manipulating between the dub and the main vocal together at the same time. Like, if they came out with a fader port that had maybe 2 to 4 faders, oh, I'd be so happy. I would get that instantly. Like, I would love that. But because really, I don't need more than maybe 4 faders. I don't use 5. 4 would be absolute max.
Yeah. Like some of these guys, they buy especially the artist mix. I've seen guys that actually build desks for them, where you can have like 4 of those suckers lined up for 32 channels, and it's like, dude, there's a button right here. It's it banks from, this.
I don't have any problems with banking. Luxury-wise, it's not bad to have that many. But realistically speaking, if I'm going for luxury, it's not going to be spent on an artist mix console of 16 of those suckers stacked end to end. It's going to be, give me like a, what is it, the API, the box summing mixer or something like that. Let me spend 16 grand on nice analog summing or something. But
yeah, I rock the dangerous stuff, man. The dangerous
box
2-bus LT.
Beautiful. How do you like that?
Oh, it's great, dude.
See, that to me is a better review than that. To me is more important than getting a review off of a Future Producers magazine.
Yeah, it's great, dude. They got the big brother model, but I got the little guy.
All right. Well, listen. I think it's about time we wrap up the show, and I wanted to say thank you to Casey Brubaker. If you need any engineering, some mixing duties done. I personally recommend him, and I say check him out. Is there any way that people can get in contact with you?
Facebook's probably the best thing right now. I mean, SoundCloud, I got stuff on there, but that's not really engineering related. That's just more production stuff. But maybe you can throw the link in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on top of that, I would say if you join the Producers Hangout Facebook group, you'll be able to see all of us. We're all inside of there. So, Pete Marriott, I'll let you sign off as well. And anything that you want to promote or talk about?
Watch Producers Hangout.
Absolutely.
I agree.
And I will say for me, check out themachinewarehouse.com. So we've got the Flux With It stuff is over there now also. So go check that out. It's on sale. So there's machine expansions. You can check out fluxwithit.com. I'm constantly putting up articles and all kinds of nerdisms about audio over there. And you can also check out bigfishaudio.com, where you can see some of the sound packs that I've released on there. Shout out to Funk Soul Productions, and go check out the work that I've done with them as well. And that's about it. So until next week, this is the Producers Hangout, episode 11, and I'm gonna get back to more bourbon, and I'm probably gonna twist some knobs. So don't judge me.
It's a good combo.
All right, guys. Everybody have a beautiful weekend, and yeah, shout out to Seattle for doing the right thing. So
Yeah.
Hey, did you want to mention? Did you already mention the donation for the funds you're trying to?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing that back up. I did want to. So in the what do we call it? In the description, there's going to be a link to a raffle. Now, this raffle can be found. It's called the Ultimate Sound Freak Charity Raffle. I highly recommend you go buy a ticket. It's $10 for a ticket, and this raffle will give you the ability to win 5 Eurorack modules, 23 VST/AU effect plugins, 3 VST instruments, and a bonus prize from Circuit Bent Video. Total retail is $2,500, and it's limited to only 1,500 tickets. So basically what happened is Ritzy Sheens, which is a very vocal and active member of the online community, had Jeremy Highhouse, excuse me, had his entire modular system stolen after a show that he did. They stole it right out of a car. A lot of it was like prototype modules and lots of really fancy stuff in there. So he had his entire modular stolen from him and has no way to recoup that. So this basically will go to help him rebuild his modular, but on top of that, 30% of the proceeds are going to the Children's Music Foundation, so which is a really worthwhile foundation. So I highly recommend you go over there, get a ticket. Hopefully one of us wins. More hopefully you guys don't win and I win because I bought a ticket, and I would really like those Eurorack modules.
Sure you would.
So, and hopefully the Children's Music Foundation wins with this as well. So right now it's at $2,240 raised out of a $15,000 goal, 21 days left. So just please support that. It's for a good cause. You might win something nice. If you win something nice and maybe you don't need the Eurorack modules or don't need certain, you can send them to me. I'll take them. It's A-okay. We can do that.
What are we gonna do with you, Flux?
Listen, I ain't too proud to beg. So anyway, episode 11, signing off. Everybody have a great weekend. Peace.